So, what are some of the most common legal issues you see in divorce cases?
It's every case is different, every family is different, so it's going to be case specific, but sort of categories is going to be child related issues, and that's broken into child support, allocation of parental responsibilities. Within that is parenting time and decision making. And then outside of the child issues is support for one of the spouses, that's maintenance or alimony, and then property distribution. So identifying assets, valuing them, and distributing them.
It's interesting because divorce has become so common now, and I think Gen Z especially are kind of looking at relationships with a very kind of wicked eye of should I get myself into something? Should I expect kind of divorce, and how should I go about the proceedings? So like, what are the kind of emotional and logistical challenges of divorce? Is it always as messy as it seems, or can it be kind of clear cut?
It's very often messy. There's emotions that get in the way of making good business or cost benefit decisions. And I'd say my perspective is a little bit skewed in that people that are going to be amicable and not fighting a ton maybe aren't using my law firm or aren't hiring me just because we're expensive. Um, but that's not to say that it doesn't happen. And so there are cases where there's less animosity. Maybe there aren't kids involved, and it's just a matter of divvying up retirement accounts and things like that. So those kind of cases do tend to be a little bit easier.
Sure. So I guess switching gears from divorce to cybersecurity, which you deal with both, what are the biggest cybersecurity threats facing families and individuals today?
The most common one is going to be phishing, and that's somebody sends you an email, asks you to click on a link, log into your account, send money, something like that. That's going to be the most common. That's increasing in frequency now more than ever, and it's getting harder to detect because what used to be, a broken English or a request to send money to like a Nigerian prince has now been replaced by Chat GPT written emails that are harder to detect. So phishing is a big one, and then something called business email compromise, which is just basically it looks like it's from somebody that works at your company. It looks like it's from your boss. It may have their name as the sender, but the sender address is not what it purports to be.
Sure. I mean, I think out of Hong Kong, some guy actually left or paid a $25 million ransom, I guess. Uh, he was not just over email, but they had set up an entire call and deep faked all of his employees and colleagues. And so these types of kind of scams are becoming more and more not just pervasive, but also common. And it seems like something that was just left to people who didn't really understand how technology functioned, how to use it properly. Now more and more, it's, my friends or, friends of colleagues, for example, that are a little bit older than me. And so as our digital world kind of evolves and pushes forth, how does the average person protect their privacy and kind of not be messed with by these phishing emails or business email compromises?
In terms of privacy, it can seem daunting. It can seem like, my information's already out there. What's the use? Google already knows all about me, or I don't have anything to hide. Those are the common pushback you get on privacy. And so the first hurdle for most people is getting over that sure, they have some of your information already. Does that mean that you need to keep feeding them that information? The answer is no. And then getting past the mindset that I don't have anything to hide, I'm not doing anything illegal or suspicious, so who cares? And that's just the wrong mindset. Privacy and secrecy are very different concepts. People confuse the two. And an example that I would give is that you're not what you're doing in the bathroom is not a secret to anyone. Everybody does the same sort of things in the bathroom. But you close the door because you want privacy. You put blinds on your home because you want privacy. So the first hurdle for people is just going to be caring that privacy matters, that your data matters, and it's not about hiding what you're doing. It's not about doing something nefarious. It's about being in control of your data and deciding who you want to give data to, how much, when, where, how. Um, and so it's more a matter of controlling your own data. So that's the hurdle with privacy. Once you get over that hurdle and you care, the tools are out there, whether that's using a VPN to mask your true IP address when you visit websites, whether you're moving to a more privacy respecting email and cloud storage provider like Proton or Tuda, whether you're using a more privacy respecting web browser like Brave and Molvad. The tools are out there, they're plentiful. It's just a matter of getting people to care and to start using them.
Why do you think that young people, especially, really don't care about their privacy? It seems like my father, for instance, always tells me to toggle certain privacy restrictions on my devices, but I've had friends that I've told the same things to, have kind of echoed what my father was saying, and they're just like, I don't really care if I get tracked. I don't care about this. I don't care about that. Is that just for young people, or have you seen this time and again in other generations as well?
It's pretty common. It's multi-generational. It's people that are thinking, I'm not doing anything wrong. So what does it matter? Or, my email inbox isn't as sacred as you think it is because I'm not sending super confidential emails. It's mostly just a receptacle for Amazon shopping receipts, Expedia travel receipts, DoorDash receipts. And even if that's the case, the problem with that mindset for your inbox is if you're like most people and you're using Gmail, that inbox you have with all those receipts tells a story of your life. And it's a pretty detailed and complete story. And it allows Google to profile you and it allows them to sell that information as they see fit. And so, why people don't care is just, I think it's they view it as futile that, my information's already out there. I can't get it back and I'm not doing anything wrong. So I don't really care anyway.
So, just touching on something you said, let's just say I'm the average Gen Z. I don't really know what a profile is. Maybe I watched The Social Dilemma by Tristan Harris, but it doesn't really sink in. A profile is not just my name and where I live and some like just run-of-the-mill data. It's much more nuanced. So could you just give a kind of like broad overview of what that profile is, what that could look like, and why it is detrimental, and how the inbox example feeds into that?
Yeah, it's a complete picture of your life. It's where you like to travel, who you like to travel with, what your shopping preferences are, what time of day you're shopping, what kind of products you're looking for, and that allows them to market to you based on your preferences. And so it's a lot of data that is being consolidated into like a dossier that just it tells anybody that wants to market any products to you, here's the way to do it based on what they shop for, when they shop, how they shop, where they shop, and the risk there is just that your data is being sold, that you're the product, you're not the consumer or you're not the customer because if you're not paying for the service, you're probably the product. I think that's the case with Gmail. Um, so, and then there's that fear that you hear from a lot of people where they might mention a product, maybe just an earshot of their phone, and then all of a sudden Instagram is, marketing that product to them. Some of that can be paranoia, some of that's real, some of that's, you gave microphone access to Facebook on your phone or something like that, or they're just marketing to you based on your Gmail inbox. And it's because they're able to build that profile on you.
Yeah, it's a very strange state of affairs to think something and then have it show up, you know, 5 minutes later while I'm browsing. Um, as Gen Z grow up, they're going to obviously some of them will at least have children. And one of the things that I've, talked about loosely on podcasts is, we have the talk about the birds and the bees, we have talks about drugs. I think we also should have talks about technology use with our kids as well, like kind of explaining to them what tech is, how it affects your mind, and establish some guardrails or restrictions around it to create or incentivize healthy behavior. So, from your perspective, how do parents strike a balance between allowing their kids to use technology, but also enhancing and maintaining the safety and privacy of the home and of their children or child?
I think transparency is key. It's sending a mixed message to your kids if you aren't disclosing the fact that you are looking at their history, their browsing, who they're texting. If you're hiding that amidst an educational moment about data privacy and things like that, they're getting the wrong message. And so it's important to be forthright with them that you're my kid. I'm giving you a device, but I'm going to monitor it. I'm going to take it from time to time and I'm going to look at it because I may be letting you use it, but it's my device and I'm doing it to keep you safe. And here's the reasons why. Here are the risks. And I think, instilling in them early that once something leaves your fingertips, so once you send a picture, once you send a message, once you tweet something, you may be able to delete it, but it may not ever really be gone. And I think that's important with kids now that, the Snapchat generation that think, well, it's like an ephemeral message that the picture deleted, so I'm good. And maybe I can send nudes or things like that. And I think it's important for kids at an early age to understand, don't send something unless you're okay with it being publicly available forever.
Sure. Oh, I guess some practical advice on a day-to-day basis. How do people harden the security of their devices, whether it's their phone or their laptop or their tablets?
Yeah, so there's a variety of different ways. When it comes to like iOS, there are things like lockdown mode that help a lot, but they do cause a little bit of friction, admittedly. There's iOS features like stolen phone protection, and then there are just permission settings that are pretty granular where you can, on a per app basis, say, I do or don't want location shared, I do or don't want microphone access, camera access. And a lot of people just don't look at that page on their phone and just sort of blindly click through and give access to the apps that are requesting it. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of them don't need the access that they're requesting. If you're downloading a calculator app, why does it need access to your phone? I'm sorry, your camera or your local network or your microphone. So I think it's important to be granular and selective with that and really only give photo access to things that need it and camera access to apps that need it. And even if the apps need it, you can deny it until you're using the app, then grant it, and then toggle it right back to deny. So even within apps that need it, there's a nuanced way of doing it that it goes a long way. It's not perfect, but it does help.
It does help, but there is this kind of like not fine line, but friction, to use one of the words that you mentioned. There's this friction between convenience and privacy. I often have to give up a lot of my privacy to have the convenience. And vice versa. If I want to if I want to enhance my privacy, a lot of the convenience of using things goes away. Are there any ways for, I guess, lawyers, are there any ways that laws could walk this line or help walk this line of, enhancing convenience while retaining privacy? Have you seen any inklings of this, or is this kind of just we have to live with it?
The inverse relationship between the two, it extends to security as well. Security and convenience don't go hand in hand very often. And It's just an extra bit of friction, what, even on things like using multi-factor authentication, it's an inconvenience sometimes. I don't want to have to type a code in. I don't want to have to touch a hardware key. I'd rather just click and be into my account. But it's important for people to understand that, a little bit of work on the front end is going to save a ton of cleanup on the back end. As far as like legislation or, things that can be done that will ease the relationship between privacy and convenience, I think one thing that is inevitable, and it will be helpful, is either regulating or just flat out shutting down data brokers as an industry, because they're buying and selling your information. They're popping up left and right. There are hundreds and hundreds of them, and they're a huge risk to your physical safety, to your cybersecurity, to your privacy. And a lot of people don't know about them and think that that fight too is a futile one if they do know about it. And it seems like the kind of thing where maybe it's not going to change until somebody in Congress has their information leaked as a result of a data broker, and then something happens to them. And I'm not wishing that on any member of Congress, but that tends to incentivize movement and legislation um, when it's something that hits home.
So let's just paint a really kind of tidy picture of data brokers. So what happens is that my Gmail inbox is free, so I'm the product, and Google goes out and sells all of that data to whomever. And then that data continues to be recycled and sold everywhere else. Is that a tidier picture of data brokers? Is there more that we can add?
That would be an example of selling data. When I refer to data brokers, I'm referring to like whitepages.com, Radaris, Spokio, things like that. Those are companies that have popped up that scrape publicly available sources of information. So like recorder of deeds websites, clerks websites, looking for litigation, looking for your address, looking for contacts. And so, when you Google your name, and one of the first things that pops up is a link to like Spokio, and you click it and it has your spouse, all your relatives, your email addresses, your phone numbers, any litigation you've been a part of, addresses that you've lived at historically. That's because it has used publicly available sources, and it's just reselling that information. It's bundling it all together, and then for a really nominal fee. I mean, you can maybe spend $2, $3 to get all that kind of information on almost anyone.
Yeah, it's a strange time that I can have. Even using the word access is a strange word to use, but have access for almost pennies of anyone, very like personal stuff of where they live and who they're interacting with on a day-to-day basis. How do people even clean up their digital footprint online? It seems like something that you can only do going forward, because as we were mentioning earlier, the internet is forever. But how can at least somebody hears this and they say, okay, I don't want this to happen in the future. I don't want my kids to go through this. How do they start right now in their inbox and social media and wherever else they go?
It is a pretty forward-looking thing, and I think it's important just to recognize the threat. Not only is it unsettling to have your information sold by data brokers, but it makes you an easier target for things like phishing, because if somebody's trying to phish you for information, the more information they have about you from the start, the easier it is to tailor a message to you. If they can throw their phone number to an area code where you live, you're more likely to pick up the phone. If they're able to write in an email your spouse's name, you're more likely to be responsive. And so recognizing it is going to be step one. And then, there are a number of sort of subscription services that assist with the manual deletion process from data brokers. And they're not doing anything that you can't do yourself for free, and for most cases. But it's a huge time saver because, as I mentioned, there are hundreds of them, and just trying to do 200 deletion requests is very time consuming. And then the problem is, if you delete your information from Spokio today, they might buy your information from another data broker tomorrow and then repost your information. So some of these subscription services, like Delete Me, they will on a quarterly basis submit deletion requests on your behalf if they have been reposted. So, there are a number of those. There's Delete Me, there's Osprey, that can be a huge time saver in terms of removing your information. And then just keeping it from being reposted to begin with is going to be key. And, to the extent your information hasn't already been disseminated, keeping good hygiene is going to keep that information from surfacing. Some of that's going to be using a more privacy respecting email provider. That's going to go a long way in terms of being the product and having your information used against you to market to you. So cleaning up what's out there and then keeping it from being republished can also be helpful. And if you're in that group of people where you want to keep your information from resurfacing and it has already been out there, then you're looking at things like compartmentalization, where you're using, maybe one email alias for each service, maybe an aliasing payment service like privacy.com, so that if and when your data is leaked from something like Netflix, what's leaked is a vendor locked credit card that can't be used anywhere else, maybe a pseudonym as a name, and then Netflix at simplelogin.com. So something that's not tied to any other accounts. And it just really minimizes the harm that can ensue when data ends up being leaked.
In your profession, day to day, are there an increasing number of cybersecurity cases? Are people coming with cybersecurity problems? And if so, could you give examples? Obviously, you probably can't get into details, but what do they look like? Is it more phishing or is it a host of other things?
In my law practice, it's more privacy issues than cybersecurity issues. So not a lot of clients are coming to me and saying, I've been hacked. It's more, somehow my spouse has access to my location. Somehow they have access to my photos, to my text messages, to my emails. Um, and so maybe that was at one point authorized access. Maybe, you gave your spouse access to your iPad, and so they have access to your emails. And so some of that is just a matter of rescinding permissions that have been granted over the span of someone's marriage. So I see more of that than I'm seeing, phishing attacks on clients.
Before we get to data leaks, how did you, get into, you know, get into law? But how did, like, why did you want to become a lawyer and what was your pathway like? And eventually, how did you find your way into cybersecurity?
I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. My grandfather was a lawyer, that motivated me. And then, I got a summer clerkship at the age of 16, working for a family law lawyer, and just sort of clung on to him since then. And I joined his firm um, as an attorney, and then we moved over to our new firm, and I moved along with him. So I sort of just fell into family law, having only wanted to be a lawyer in general. And then somewhere in the early stages of COVID, when the court system shut down and lawyers were sort of twiddling their thumbs, waiting for the Zoom age to catch up to courts, um, I spent a significant amount of time reading, researching, watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts about cybersecurity and privacy subjects, and just sort of became infatuated with it. Um, because it's one of those things that it's like a real deep rabbit hole that maybe there's no bottom to. And that culminated with, obtaining some formal certification, taking a course on cybersecurity. And that came from just a genuine interest in privacy and security prior to that as well. I've always been a Proton Mail person as long as it's been out. I've always used Signal. So it sort of just snowballed.
I just want to touch on something that you mentioned. What was practicing law like during COVID? What was it as frictiony as you suggested, or was it worse?
Um, it courts are slow to adapt. They're slow to change. The law is slow to change. So, the first few months were very slow. There was not a lot going on. Eventually, the court system caught up. And then it was just a huge backlog of cases. So, it might take you 4 or 5 months to get in front of a judge because the court system was trying to catch up. We're sort of in a hybrid age right now where sometimes we're in person, sometimes we're on Zoom. And some of that depends on what you're going to court for. One of the struggles that was taking place over Zoom was if you needed to do an evidentiary hearing or trial because of just the mechanics of trying to like screen share exhibits just isn't what judges are used to. They're used to paper copies, and it made it harder to sort of read the body language of witnesses because all you're seeing is their head and you're not sure, is there somebody else in the room? Are they looking at notes? So there were just sort of inherent limitations imposed by video conferencing over being in person. And so now the outcome of that is mostly if you are looking at an evidentiary hearing or trial, you're in person. And if it's just a quick check-in, you're probably on Zoom.
Obviously, we're just talking loosely here, but do you see any immediate ways that we could kind of inject technology into practicing law that would make things way easier, way more streamlined, way more efficient? Like, again, speaking out loud, would being in the metaverse kind of remove that? I don't know whether someone is behind the camera. You could see potential like little body language things, body language cues. Obviously, I'm going to talk about AI, but are we kind of neglecting technology because we're more comfortable in antiquity, or are there ways that we could overnight reshape the court system and the legal system to be more streamlined and for everybody?
I think the hybrid age is trying to walk that line because you know, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to be billing a client 4 hours if I needed to drive to a collar county of the city that I live in. Whereas, now if it's a quick court appearance, I can flip open my laptop, be on and off in 20 minutes. And that's what the client pays for, as opposed to 3 hours of travel, an hour sitting in court waiting. So I think that that does help with efficiency, but there's ways to go for the court system. There are still some courtrooms where you log on to Zoom and you're one of 60 cases waiting to be called, and so you're sitting around waiting a lot. So I think there's room for improvement in that regard and some other places as well.
Sounds like the public education system a little bit during COVID. Um, I just have one like kind of fun question, but do you watch the TV show Suits at all?
I did. I did.
You did? What did you think about that?
Harvey Specter's my guy. I loved him.
Okay, I was gonna say, because is it kind of like a hit or miss show for lawyers? Like, is that show so like dramatized and so cringy that lawyers don't like watching it, or are there some, similarities to real life in that?
A lot of the lawyers I know like the show. It's not so much dramatized as it is just sort of abbreviated. It's not common in the real world, obviously, where a case is filed and settled within an hour, but it doesn't make sense to have a 2 year episode. So obviously they needed to expedite it a little bit. It also doesn't happen very often where you walk into an opposing counsel's office with a folder that has one sheet of paper in it and that wins the case.
Okay.
But it makes for more entertaining television, and it's in good fun.
Sure, sure. It's I'm glad you brought up the folder situation because now I'm gonna rewatch the TV show and look at it from that perspective. How is artificial intelligence impacting your career? Because being a lawyer, it's very multifaceted. You have a lot of paperwork, but there's also a lot of the interpersonal at play. And it seems like AI can help, like, speaking loosely, with the paperwork aspect. Is that the case, or have you found integrating AI more challenging?
I think overall lawyers are or should be a little reluctant to just dive right in. because of the privacy concerns, because, it hasn't really been tested as far as, who owns the data once you're sending it out to like a chat GPT model. And, as lawyers, we have a fiduciary obligation to maintain confidentiality to our clients. And so you're walking a fine line if you're just like dumping your client's information into an AI model that you don't know a whole lot about and hoping for the best. There are a number of legal service oriented AIs, like LexisNexis and Westlaw. They're sort of in beta version of the project, and the pitch there is it's okay to give us your client's data. We're not training our models on what you're uploading, but there's still a little bit of trust required to dive right into that. Now that that's not to say that there aren't uses for it. Um, to the extent you're able to anonymize the data that you're using, to the extent you're able to use it for things like um, summarizing cases that have been recently released or disseminated or decided from like appellate courts and Supreme Courts. It can help you to stay on top of new cases and to summarize them for you. But I think as an industry, we're reluctant to just dive right in now.
Sure. Are there any other kind of future technologies that interest you or excite you? I know the space of genetic modification will bring up a lot of legal and ethical challenges. Um, Astropolitics, space settlements will bring up a lot of legal disputes and a lot of ethical disputes as well. Are these things interesting to you? Are they on your mind at all, or are there other fields that speak out to you?
AI is on the top of my mind. It's such an untapped resource right now, and its potential has not been realized. And so, I know it's like the buzzword of the day, AI, but it really does interest me. And I think the applications of it are limitless. And obviously, like most tools, there's a good use and there's a bad use, and so there are going to be nefarious actors that are misusing it. But the application of it is um, we're scratching the surface, and so I think that still excites me a little bit. And then the concept of quantum computers is pretty crazy to me. It seems like that's coming sooner than anybody was expecting. So those two I think are still exciting to me.
How would quantum computers impact your work? Is it just the fact that it's like a faster computer, or are there
Well,
other things?
it's going to be able to do things in a fraction of the time that modern computers would take more time to do, for one. But inherent in that, one of the things that it's going to be able to do is break encryption that we use for everything. You use a certain kind of encryption when you go to a website and you see the little padlock in the address bar. Your banking information is using a certain kind of encryption. All your cloud storage is using a certain kind of encryption. Emails in transit, they're using a certain kind of encryption. And for the most part, quantum computers are going to break all of those forms of encryption. And that's going to have a big impact on everything. There are a number of providers that are, working on post quantum encryption um, methods, and whether those hold up or not remains to be seen. But that's going to change everything when that's publicly available.
It seems like you're setting yourself up for a lot of success because there's going to be a lot of legal disputes when the encryption craze happens. Um, Last question. This is the Gen Z Diplomat podcast. So, what advice do you have for Gen Z, maybe in the realm of cybersecurity, in the realm of divorce, in the realm of law, or just, in general? What have you seen in terms of the generation, their quirks, their features, their shortcomings, and what can you say to uplift them and give them more hope?
It's easy when you're looking at a tall staircase to be overwhelmed by the height of the staircase. And in general, you're better off looking at the step in front of you and taking that step. And that's no different with privacy and security. It can seem overwhelming, it can seem daunting, and to the point where, I'm either private and secure or I'm not, and I don't have the time or the education or the desire to flip that switch. But it's not a switch. It's not a switch where one day you're secure and one day you're private. It's a journey. It's not a destination. And so you can do little things in your daily life that have little to no friction that go a long way, and it's worth it. You can reclaim a significant amount of your privacy with little effort. So I think that's important to keep in mind. And then also, not being jaded by divorce rates. I would say, don't shy away from marriage just because people get divorced a lot. Just plan for it, whether that's, doing a prenup with your spouse, waiting until you've lived together to test whether you're compatible and living together. Just, be responsible about it as opposed to just giving up on the concept entirely.
Fantastic. Jonathan, thank you so much for this talk today.
Sure. Thank you.